Hello everybody, welcome back to a new video. My name is Sarah and today we are going to be doing my July wrap up. Currently it's storming right now and my air conditioning's going on, and so you're gonna hear thunder, you're gonna hear my air. If the power goes out, that could happen. Who knows? I didn't put any makeup on again. This video is just gonna be a bit of a mess. But it's currently August 10th. I should have filmed this a week ago. But I'm filming it now because it needs to get done. And we're just gonna get right into it. I read 8 books in the month of July. And so I'm gonna try to do this a little bit of a speed round, this kind of wrap up. We all know how long I talk about each book in normal wrap ups. And by the time I finish wrapping up 8 books, in this wrap up, you guys have been watching for like 6 hours, and I don't have time to edit that much. You guys don't have time to watch that much, so we're gonna just try to kind of quickly go through these, and hopefully this will help me become better at just giving more succinct wrap ups to begin with. Also, it's kind of weird, I somehow managed to read 8 books. This is actually the most books that I read per month since I started kind of keeping track at the beginning of 2020. But July felt like it was both 3 seconds and 3 years long, so somehow in that weird little time bubble I managed to read 8 books. The first book that I read was The Raven King by Maggie Stiefvater. This is the 4th and final book in the Raven Cycle series. So the main characters of this series is Blue, she's the daughter of a clairvoyant, and then 4 boys called the Raven Boys that go to a private school, and they are searching for a long lost king who the legend says if they wake him up they will be granted 1 wish. And so Blue kind of gets tangled up in their quest to find the king, and her kind of aiding them ends up being a catalyst for a lot of different events. So I really loved this book. This was a very excellent finale to the series. I've been really enjoying this series a lot. This definitely feels like it has a lot more going on than the I guess the first 3 books. Obviously that makes sense because you have a lot that you have to wrap up, but the first 3 books definitely feel very meandering. Kind of the 3rd book gets a little bit quicker paced and has a little bit more sense of direction, but it still feels kind of meandering. But this one definitely, like, it had a goal in mind to wrap a lot of things up, and so you kind of knew where the plot was going in general. I loved how this kind of felt like it really came full circle, which I really appreciated. You kind of found a lot of like parallels and just like callbacks to the beginning of the series, I felt, in this one. I just thought that it was a really perfect ending. We really get a lot of good wrap-ups for all of our characters. Yeah, there's not much more that I could say about this series that I haven't already said in previous videos, but I highly recommend this series. It's kind of an older YA series, but if you haven't read it and you're looking for kind of something that's magical realism, dark academia, kind of occult witchy vibes, definitely consider picking this up. It is very atmospheric and I highly recommend it, and I rated this one 4.5 stars. So then the next book that I picked up was A Torch Against the Night by Sabat Tahir. This is the 2nd book in the Ember Quartet series. This series follows Leia and Elias. They live in kind of a militaristic empire. One day Leia's house gets raided and her brother's arrested, and in order to save her brother she enlists the help of a group of rebels, and they agree to help her if she agrees to infiltrate the military academy and become a spy for them. And while she's there she meets Elias, who is kind of their top student at this academy, but he's also their most reluctant and has been looking to leave. And that's kind of where this series starts out. Now this is the 2nd book. I really enjoyed the 2nd book. It was definitely just as fast-paced and addictive to read as the first one. We also seem to get a bit more of Leia's character, and then Elias's character takes a very interesting turn, which I wasn't expecting but I really enjoyed. And one other thing that I really liked is that we actually get the perspective of Helene. She is your 3rd character that you see here. She is a childhood best friend of Elias, and she is put in a very interesting predicament, kind of starting back in the 1st book. but definitely more so in the second book, and you just can't help but root for her even though she's on the opposite side of Leia and Elias, and I just think that Tahir did a really good job of writing her that way. This book ends up incorporating a lot more of like fantastical elements compared to the first one, which I wasn't expecting. Like, we get a little bit of fantastical elements and like we get a little bit of glimpses of like some of the creatures in the first book, but this one definitely employs them a lot more, and I really enjoyed them. I know it definitely, like I said, it wasn't something that I expected. It's something that I really enjoyed, and I think it was a well-included element of this story. This one definitely did end on more of a cliffhanger as compared to the first one, so I'm very excited to see where the rest of this series goes, and I ended up giving this one 4 stars. So then the third book that I picked up was Sold on a Monday by Christina McMorris. Now, I did just do a review video with my dad. He buddy read this with me, so if you want a pretty in-depth discussion on it, check out that video. I will link it down below. So I'll just kind of keep this pretty brief like I've been trying to do with the rest of the books. So this book is set in the 1930s, and we follow 2 main characters, Elias and Lily. Elias works at a newspaper and Lily is a secretary there, and one day Elias stumbles across kind of this picturesque moment where there's 2 kids sitting on a porch and there's a sign out in front of them that says 2 children for sale. He snaps a photo, not intending it for the press, but kind of more as his personal photography hobby, but it ends up winding up in the hands of his editor-in-chief. Lily gets wrapped up in this in a way, and then it ends up in this photo ends up in the paper in the story, and Elias's career takes off. However, there are some pretty severe repercussions for the children in the photo and the family, and this story just kind of follows Elias, Lily, and kind of how they're going to handle this whole situation. I did really enjoy this book. Like I said in my video reviewing it, I don't read a lot of historical fiction, so this was a very refreshing take on it. I did find it a bit hallmarky. Just kind of, I felt like there was another layer that we could have went into in terms of like social commentary and kind of the grittiness of the era. We did kind of touch on it, but I kind of wished that McMorris would have dug in a little bit deeper into it. What's interesting about this book is that we follow more of like the reporters and kind of their lives, and the children in the story almost takes like a back seat for the first half of the story, but the second half we definitely focus on that a lot more. I really enjoyed McMorris's writing style. I thought that it was really well done. It definitely evokes like a sense of atmosphere of the times. She does a very good job of taking different kind of iconic themes and moments during this time period, such as obviously the Great Depression, but also Prohibition and kind of the mob, and all looping them into the atmosphere of this story. Overall, I did really enjoy it, and I think that it is a very well done story. I just kind of wish that it packed a little bit more of a punch than what it did, and that we would have focused a little bit more on the children and kind of their lives before and during this whole situation a little bit more than what we did. But I ended up giving this 3.5 stars. So after that, I picked up Girl A by Abigail Dean. This is kind of a slower paced, quieter thriller. So in this book, we follow our main character. She is an adult now, but she grew up in what's called a house of horrors. Her and her siblings were like chained to their beds and kind of severely abused by their parents. But our main character was the child that was able to escape the house and find help for her and her siblings. And now it's 15 years later when everybody is grown up, and the mother had just passed away. The father didn't make it out of the house, and so the house is then willed to the children, and our main character and along with one of her sisters, is wanting to make this into kind of like a community center. And so during this book, she's going to each of her siblings and reconnecting with each of them in order to get them to sign off on their consent to let the house be built into a community center. I really enjoyed how this book started out. However, it definitely petered out towards the end for me. What's really interesting is the way this book is organized, and I think that it both helps and hinders this book a lot. So this book is broken up into different sections, and each section is kind of one of the siblings. And so in each section, girl A, or Lex, that's her real name, she is going to each of those siblings, and then we're kind of jumping between her reuniting with them after various lengths of time of kind of being apart from them, depending on the sibling, and then kind of flashbacks to what she remembers of them during their childhood in this house, and kind of how they were treated and how they were impacted in particular. And then we also flash back to other points of Lex's life throughout the entirety of the book. The thing that bugged me the most was how quickly we jumped between time points. Sometimes it felt like you would be jumping like every other page, and oftentimes it was very hard to figure out exactly what time point you were at. Like, you could tell if you were in the childhood house or if you were in present day. But what got really hard was if you were in present day or if you were in like a flashback of Lex's from like college. Those oftentimes got kind of hard to discern between, especially if Lex was not currently with one of her siblings. I think that Dean did a very good job of kind of giving each sibling a very distinct sense of like healing, or like a very distinct way of dealing with their trauma, and kind of exploring how there are many different ways to deal with trauma. I think Dean did a very good job of that. There is a twist at the end. However, I think that the hint that was given about the twist towards the beginning of the story was very heavy-handed, and so I did see it coming. It's not to say I don't think it was a good twist, it just didn't hit me as hard. Like I said, this is a very quiet thriller because like all of the events had already happened, and now we're experiencing them through flashbacks instead of like while the character is experiencing them, so we already know the outcome. But overall, it was a pretty decent thriller. I didn't love it, I didn't hate it. I ended up giving it 3 stars. Alright, I feel like that one was a little bit long-winded, but we're gonna try to go back to speed round here. So next, I read Graceland by Christine Kishore. This is, the green light is really hitting this. This is the first book in the Graceland Realm series. I was reading this as part of the Graceland Along that is being hosted to read along this series together. I will link their Twitter down below. Sadly, I do not plan to continue with this read along because I did not enjoy this book as much as I was hoping to. I think if I read this like a year or two ago, maybe like 2 or 3 years ago, I think I would have enjoyed it a lot more than what I do now. It just really did not hit it for me. I just could not click with anything about this book. Characters, setting, writing style, even plot, like just nothing really grabbed me, and I was just really bored through a big chunk of it. Something about our main character, Katza, just kind of really bugged me, and I love like really tough murder ladies. Like, I love those types of characters. Just something about the way the Katza was written just didn't jive with me. She had some really weird reactions to things that just didn't make sense to me. Like, towards the last quarter of the book, I definitely got a little more invested in the plot, but like the whole first 3 quarters, I was, like I said, just really bored. I did really enjoy Bitterblue, who comes into this in the later part of the book, and there is actually a whole separate book that follows her. I think it's the 3rd book in this series, but like I said, I don't think I'm going to be continuing it. I did end up giving it 2.5 stars because I did really like the magic system in this book and how it was incorporated in the story and how it worked, and also how it really developed for two of our main characters in particular. I found it developed in a really interesting way. But other than that, I just was not really vibing with it, and like I said, I don't think I'm going to be continuing this series. And then the sixth book that I read was The Dark Tide by Alicia Jasinska. Now this is a standalone YA fantasy, came out last year, and I had been really excited about it, but for whatever reason I kind of put it off picking it up, even though it had been on my TBR cart. And this month I had finally decided that I was going to pick it up, and when I started it I was like, why did I ever put this off? Because I really enjoyed this book. It's really short. It's like 300 pages, a little over 300 pages long, but I think Jasinska does a really good job of like keeping this story in a very succinct, closed circuit. It doesn't feel like you're missing a lot. She does a good job of creating a kind of a backstory to this world and the magic behind it. I really loved the magic system and how it worked, and kind of how it was like material witchy magic almost. There was lots of knot tying and hair being used. It was very interesting. It was also a very vibrant book. The colors, you could just feel the colors around you, or the lack of colors. I felt that was really well done. I kind of didn't super jive with our main characters. I liked the idea of them. I liked the relationship that developed a lot, but we had one main character in particular that was supposed to be kind of this like cold-hearted witch queen that was just like absolutely brutal, and like we talked about how she was supposed to be this way, but in her actions I just didn't really see it. She didn't seem as brutal as like she was built up to be, but I did like how this story played out, and I liked kind of the twist and how the solution came to be. I really enjoyed that, and even though we actually don't get a full resolution of the story, but we get a immediate solution to the problem, if that makes sense. I don't want to spoil it, but I did really enjoy kind of where that went, and kind of how Jasinska decided to solve this problem. And overall I ended up giving this 4 stars. So after that I listened to the audiobook of The Whisper Man by Alex North. Now, Alex North wrote one of my favorite books of 2020, The Shadows, and this is his first book, and I was so excited to pick it up, but I was like really nervous because I was worried that it wasn't going to live up to the hype. However, it definitely did. North has a way of really evoking this like sense of anxiety from the very beginning, and this suspenseful feeling. So what I loved is that there's aspects of the story that you can't tell if they're supernatural or not, and this ends up being involved in the shadows, which is what I loved, but it ends up being involved in The Whisper Man in a very different way. And I just think that North did a really good job of writing the kind of crime investigation side of the story, as well as the personal side of the story that some of the characters go through. He adds a lot of personal life and issues to each of the characters, and I thought that was really well done. And I realized I didn't even say what this book was about. Here I am thinking I'm on a roll, and I just don't even explain now what the 7th book is about. So let's backtrack a little bit. The Whisper Man follows kind of 2 main perspectives. We follow a boy and his father who his mother just died, and so now they're moving to a new town. And then you're following 2 investigators, and they are investigating the disappearance of a young boy, and his disappearance quickly starts to mirror those that happened about 15-20 years ago, where little boys started disappearing, and kind of a common thread between them was that they complained to their parents leading up to their disappearance that they heard whispers in their window. And so 15 to 20 years ago, that culprit was caught, but now they're starting to happen again. and the boy and his father find themselves kind of wrapped up in this whole situation, and then the two detectives have to obviously solve the crime. And I just really enjoyed this. I feel like I haven't read a lot of crime thrillers, but I definitely would recommend Alex North's crime thrillers if that's a genre that you're interested in, or one that you just like in general. So I highly recommend it, and I gave this 4.5 stars. And then the final book that I read in July was Certain Dark Things by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. Now, the publisher and NetGalley gave me access to a review copy because this book was published a few years ago and quickly went out of print, but now it is coming back into print September 7th. And thank you so much to the publisher and NetGalley for granting me access to this review copy. So we followed two main characters in Mexico City. So we follow Domingo, who's a street kid, and then we follow Aunt, who is a vampire on the run. She is wrapped up in kind of a drug cartel ran vampire reign, so she's on the run, and so her and Domingo cross paths and end up kind of working together to get themselves out of Mexico City. Now, this is another really short book. This is like around 300 pages, and sadly I don't think that this length worked for this book. That's kind of my biggest complaint, is that we were dropped right in the middle of Adul's story, and I just really struggled to find my footing in the book with where we were dropped in. We could have definitely used a whole extra 100 pages to really set the groundwork of the beginning that does get explained to us, but really I think the whole story would have packed a lot more of a punch if we had those extra pages. And that kind of, those extra pages also could have come in handy with really developing the relationship between the two main characters, because as it progresses I just didn't see the chemistry at all, and it just didn't quite make sense. I did really like how our characters were written. I do think that they were well written, just the relationship just did not fit for me. And I did really like the atmosphere and kind of the world building that Moreno Garcia built into this book. So I think that she did a really good job with that, because there's not just like one type of vampire. She took like lore from all over the world that involves vampires and kind of built different subspecies of vampires and created this like pretty in-depth history of like vampires and how humans learned that they were real for what we got in the book. I do think that she did a very good job of that, and I was very impressed. It was a very fast-paced book, so I did enjoy that, and we did get a lot of like gory, bloody vampire scenes, so if you're looking for that in a vampire book, I would definitely consider checking out Certain Dark Things, but overall I ended up giving this 3 stars. So these are the books plus Certain Dark Things and The Whisper Man that I read in July. If you've read any of these books, definitely let me know down in the comments below, or if you're interested in reading any of them, I'd love to hear it. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you consider sticking around and subscribing, but as always, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!